Welcome to the Better Agent Podcast. If you're a real estate agent that's looking to grow your business, then you're in the right place. Whether you want to go from 5 to 10 transactions a year, or 10 to 50 transactions per year, or more, well, then this show is for you. I'm Josh Lavik, your host for the Better Agent Podcast, and in each episode, we'll bring you the tools, tips, and tricks directly from myself and some of the best leaders within the real estate industry. We have one goal in mind, and that's to boost your production and elevate your real estate game. Let's dive in and start creating a better real estate experience together. Welcome back to the Better Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Lavik, and on our show, we are talking about how to improve your real estate business, getting better and better every day and every year. So whether you're an agent brand new or maybe only doing a handful of transactions, looking to go to maybe 10 transactions or 10 to 20 or 20 to 30 or more, maybe you even want to have aspirations of becoming a broker or owner or something like that. You know, this podcast and this message is hopefully for you because we are all about growth in your real estate business and how can we contribute to you and give you some tips and nuggets and ideas to help you grow your business and become a better agent. So without further ado, again, my name is Josh Lavik. I'm your host and been in the real estate business for 20 years. And we have our team here in Madison, Wisconsin, and we are always continuing to grow and learn. And part of that is through the wonderful guests that we have on our show. And today I've got a great guest with me. Monte is with us. He's up in the Green Bay market. And without further ado, I'll let Monte kind of give a little intro about himself and share a little bit more about his background.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Josh. So my background stems, I don't know how far you want me to go back, but a little history on me is, played some sports in college, was on a scholarship to UW Parkside, and then transferred to Stevens Point, finished running track and playing football there. And then I got into coaching. That was kind of my passion. Quite honestly, that's the only certificate I got out of college was actually a coaching degree. I was like
coaching football.
I coached football. I coached a lot of sports. I coached basketball when I got done, but I got the coaching certificate. So that was it. The rest of the degrees, I'm 12 credits from a double major in geography and business and just never finished. My ADD, if I would have recognized it earlier, probably would have got into real estate a lot sooner. And then throughout my 30s, I worked as a recruiting middleman for high school coaches and college coaches. And that was a really great job. And, I was in that for I was there for 10 years, but at about 8 years, I realized, I couldn't see myself doing the same job for the next 25 or 30. So my brother, who's a real estate investor, really does a great job of, helping people out of really tough situations, does some wholesale and, some off marketing and things like that. He has a really big brand. So shout out to Wisconsin Discount Properties and I Buy WI. If you guys want to take a look and if there's any investors here, it's a great one, especially Northeast Wisconsin down into Milwaukee. Get on his lists at that website, I Buy WI, and you'll get some
WI. All right. I'll check that out.
Yeah,
I'm an investor as well. So
yep. So it's a great way to get involved in real estate investing. So he forced me into that. I worked for him a little bit. I shouldn't say he forced me, but he, encouraged me to get into real estate. I worked for him for a little bit. Wasn't, I was good at it, but I didn't love it. It was like the wholesale thing. So I got more into the retail side. I failed forward on my first flip. We'll call it that. But I loved the human aspect of it, the human element of there's so many different people involved in a real estate transaction. I don't think a lot of people realize. And so from there, I went and got my real estate license. And then, 4 years in, got my broker's license and now own a brokerage here in Green Bay called Take Action Realty Group. And I was voted by Rate My Agent, the number one agent in Brown County and Green Bay and top 8 in the state of Wisconsin last year. So I got a lot of irons in the fire. I still do a lot of investing and flipping, and we have a whole side business with that. And we also have a rental business for events and planning and for corporate rentals and decor and all that stuff too. So we have a lot of irons in the fire. I have a great team of people around me. So you don't get to this spot without that. And that's my history. That's my rise, I guess, in real estate. We'll see where it takes me.
Yeah, I love so much about your story because I think it resonates similarly with my story in the sense that I think there's a lot of agents that kind of have to fail forward, right? You had a failed flip, you had a hard knocks. There was challenges along the way. I remember when I first got started in the business, that was probably I've been doing this almost 20 years, and it's like my first 2 years were by far the hardest because at that point, I wasn't even a homeowner. I didn't even know what it took to own a home. And I had a lot of self-confidence issues and limiting beliefs and that kind of thing. And so I think you got to just, if you're committed though, to keeping going and you're committed to succeeding, you're going to find a way. And so I love that part of your story, that you just kind of kept adding to it and figuring things out and decided, maybe wholesaling investing isn't your niche, but maybe more the retail side is, and you totally just found your niche. So I think finding your niche is totally important for any realtor to figure that out.
And I think the one thing that was really cool about working in as an investor, working for my brother, was learning how to be creative and problem solve, because every situation there's a solution. And essentially, as real estate agents, we are problem solvers. I mean, every single person, it's whether it's a perceived problem or not. If you think about it, it's like, hey, for example, I have a doctor relocating to Green Bay. Like, that's great. Not necessarily a problem per se for real world situations, right? But it's still a problem for them. And it's a solution. We have to find a solution to their dilemma. They're moving here for a job. That's their dilemma. We got to find them the solution. That's finding them a house that's going to be a great fit for them to move in. And there's a lot of trust that's put into somebody they've never met in person to help them and find them that home that's going to be, a place where they're happy and it's their home, So those are the big things, I think, too, as far as like the first 2 years in real estate for any new agent. And I talk about this all the time, and I had a really good mentor. I actually saw him this morning, which was cool. I haven't seen him in a while. But one of the brokers that I started off with, I asked him a similar question, what should I expect for the first 2 years? And it was simple. And I don't know if you allow swearing here, but he just said, you have to be willing to eat shit for 2 years. You have to sacrifice and be willing to understand, like, you're starting a new business. You're not working for somebody. Like, as the broker, for me personally, I'm almost like insulted if somebody says they work for me. The reality of it is, if they're giving me part of their commission, part of their split, then I need to supply them value. I need to work for them. And so as an independent broker, that's the mentality I've taken, because my last broker, was similar to that way. He was very good with me. He taught me. It wasn't great as far as learning marketing and other things. Like, I had that from my previous career. What I learned from him was the moral ethics, doing things the right way. And he did a great job of that. And then I applied all the other things of used to running a business and working on a national scale, and, how to talk to people was all things that I had learned in the past. But applying the ethics and morals to a business is huge too, because that's where you get your trust, and people buy, from people they like and trust. Right. So of course, to unpack, but that was those are the principles. Right. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just it. I've talked to a number, and we've brought on even some new agents that come in and maybe don't always realize what's expected, and they don't maybe realize how long it may take to earn a paycheck, right? You're not in a regular, W-2 position where you get paid every 2 weeks, right? Your best case scenario is from the day you get a client, from the day you get an accepted offer with a property, you're probably 30 to 60 days out. So, you're realistically, you start on day one, best case, you're maybe 3 months, worst case, maybe a year, who knows? I mean, it depends on how fast you are and how many how many relationships you can develop and how many clients you can get in the pipeline. But the sooner you can get that going, the sooner you can build up that pipeline. I mean, in some ways, I think people with ADD do better in this business, because 100%. You're always juggling a lot of balls. You're always juggling a lot of clients.
I'm fully diagnosed with ADD too. I always talk about that. I have real estate AD because I have my flipping business. I have this business, I have my event business, and it is a great field for that. It's not structured, like a typical thing. And we're working on that right now. I have 14 agents that are at my brokerage, and we just started a training academy 2 weeks ago. And the first thing we talked about was expectations, and, understanding a new agent that comes in is not just, it doesn't happen. Thankfully, I'm glad that I did this when I started, because I was doing the W-2 thing when I started, just like everybody else typically does. Is, it's hard to leave that security of a W-2. And it's understandable if they don't. Like, I would say half of my agents that are here are W-2 employees. The other ones are coming from other businesses or small businesses that they do. But the one thing I logged was, how many hours did it take for me to get my first deal? It was 80 hours to get my first deal. Now, that's not 2 weeks of work, because I'm still doing my W-2. So it might have been 2 hours 1 week, 2 hours one day, 3 hours the next day. And it was always farming and networking and, learning skills. I think that's the other thing is, I talk about the 3 things a new agent behaviors need to have. And that's one, patience, because it just doesn't happen overnight. If you don't have patience, it's going to be a very hard start to your career. You need to be consistent. Every single day you need to put something in, and then you need to be curious. And it's not just like the contracts. the thing that drives me nuts about the bigger brokerages is they say they got this elaborate training program and they're going to train you on all the contracts. That's huge, right? You need to learn those things because that's important.
That's like playing poker. That's your ante. You got to know the contracts. That's
right.
Your
You got to
job.
know the contracts. However, they don't teach you how to sell. They don't teach you how to run the business. They don't teach you accounting. They don't teach you marketing. You're kind of on your own. You're on an island a lot of times.
Sure.
And I'm not saying for every big brokerage, of course, but and it's probably location based, but it's one of the things that you have to understand is you have to be willing to dive in for 2 years and know there is going to be minimal return in those first 2 years. But if I continually do that, my life will get a lot easier. And what I noticed then was, okay, first deal was 80 hours. Then the next one was 60. Then it was 40. And now this week I had 7 closings, 6 years later. Just this week alone, I had 7 closings. So,
wow, that's awesome.
So you get into those little things, but you're planting the seeds. You don't know when it's going to come.
Yep.
You also need to understand, like, this is not about you. This career is never about you. It's you're providing value, oftentimes nothing in return, right? You're providing so much value and you're not getting anything back. So if your expectations are to receive instant gratification, probably not going to happen. Not a good career for you either.
Yeah.
So you're providing value.
People only move every 7 to 10 years, right? So
yeah, it's a little quicker now, I guess. Maybe with COVID and all the other stuff, we'll talk about that on a different day. But that's the mentality is, like, people consistently are going to move, but you have to build your network. You have to have people that trust you and be able to get your name out there. And then the other thing I'll give is, as far as advice goes, is be a resource, meaning have connections with contractors, have connections with cleaners, have connections. Like, we went out, like, for me personally, our team, we went and bought a moving truck and we give that to our clients on moving day. Like, take the stress out of it for them. It's a really stressful situation for anybody. You have to think people's personalities change during a transaction too, right? Like you notice, and I went and spoke at a lender conference 2 years ago now. At the lender conference, one of the people asked me, like, why do people all of a sudden get crazy when, I'll ask for pre-approval, they're fine, they give me the documents, and all of a sudden, why do people just get crazy, 30 days before closing or 20 days? I'm like, because they're packing up their house. They don't know where their documents are, maybe on the computer. Everything is going to be new. So they got to get their house cleaned, or wherever they're living, whether it's an apartment or it's a current house. They got to get it clean. They got to get it ready. Then you're asking them for paperwork and they may not know where it is. Then they have to get all the utilities and everything else ready to go. They got to get so many different things lined up. Their whole lives are uprooted. So it's our job to take the emotion out of it and just be empathetic to their, their situation and what they're going through, and just be a calming sense. So those are, I threw a lot in there, but that's a lot of
part of those traits you talk about, right? Patience and curious and, just being helpful, being a resource. I think, I have a similar thing, right? We have a moving truck as well. And it's just I bought it for that exact reason, like to be the resource, to be helpful in that process, right? Like whatever we can do to add value to our clients and help them through that process, we want to try to do as well, for sure. So, and it's not, there's only a handful of other agents out there that I'm aware even have that truck, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. It's not.
I don't know that there's anybody in our location from, Appleton up to the UP border. I don't know of anybody else who has one.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, I think in some ways it's, we talk about that too in some of our training and onboarding for new agents, right? We talk a lot about just conversations, right? Because in some ways this business is simple in the sense that you got to have a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and you're calling and following up and nurturing people or don't know, or somebody comes into an open house or whatever it might be. But it's like, just showing up with that right mindset of having a structured kind of conversation, and what does that dialogue look like? What does that flow look like? It's an important piece for sure, but it's hard to keep going sometimes and get that persistence to keep
and I think again too, like, if you're showing up, and not to say what you're saying, I think it's important, but I think if you're showing up to places with the expectation that you're there to get clients, you're already behind the 8 ball, right? Like, if you just need to show up. Like, we have an agent here, she started last June. She capped out for us this week in her first year. And I don't know how many deals she's done, but she just shows up. She's available. She's a calming sense. She does the little things that make the big difference. And that's what it is. You have to be as frictionless in this business as possible, meaning don't create barriers that aren't there just for the sake of the fact that you're a real estate agent. Like, so many people get in the way of an easy transaction and they ruin it for everybody else. So
is there an example that comes to mind, like, of what you're talking about right there? Like,
yeah, I mean, I have one. I
waiting
had a closing a few weeks ago, for example.
Yeah.
The agent, it was a cooperating agent. I won't obviously give any names or the brokerage or anything he's affiliated with, but this person was relocating from Missouri, VA. So obviously a lot of moving parts already with VA. They're going to this house. And for example, I went down to it's a 45-minute to an hour drive for me to go to their house. So of course I'm not making daily trips down to their house to check in on them or do anything. So I had her do a quick video walkthrough for me. And then I brought the title company with me to go to closing. Like, we pre-closed, brought it down there. This other couple, come to find out, wasn't going to, they didn't have any intention of coming up. They just wanted a video walkthrough for the final walkthrough. They had no intention of coming up or moving here until the middle of April. So it would have been like April 15th, they were moving up, for example. Our closing was at the end of March. So instead of him setting up a remote online notary or telling the title company to do this, which they were fully capable of, they went through the same title company I do. They do it all the time for me when there's remote instances. He made them drive up from Missouri. Then they got to Oshkosh, made them drive to Green Bay for the closing, and they went to the final walkthrough on Saturday, and the house still had stuff in it, right? Like, they still have 2 more days to close. The closing was on Monday. So they're still moving things out. You know, they have the cleaners there, they have the movers there. So it was chaotic. And I just said to my sellers, I said, hey, listen, like, they're going to be there. Just let them know, like, obviously everything is getting cleaned and whatever. Shouldn't be a big deal. Buyers were fine with that. The agent made a huge deal out of it the next morning. He called me and said, like, hey, we have some concerns. He got to the closing table, made a whole bunch of issues that were not issues at all. And then delayed closing half the day because the other stuff wasn't done. And to his defense, the sellers still had a few things in the garage they had worked out. So there was some verbal communication between the buyers and the sellers that typically don't happen. But they had an agreement to say, yeah, just leave some stuff in there. We aren't going to be in anyway. We just want to move a couple of things in, and no big deal. Well, he wanted a post-occupancy agreement, which fine. I like having things in writing. But then he's like trying to charge them rent for an extra day on a $500,000 for $100 a day. And he's like trying to be the hero for these people. And
trying to make it too complicated. Yeah.
And these guys were already mad because they had to come. They found out during that day that they didn't have to come up from Missouri. They didn't have to do all this stuff. They could have just moved in at that date. So just little things like that you just get out of the way. Yeah. And you can make it makes it a lot easier. So that's just one, example. There was a lot more to it, but just the little things like that you can get in your own way by having an ego that is unnecessary. Quite honestly, the goal is to get them a house, not to be their hero. You'll be a hero anyway, so just get out of the way, give them what they want, and make sure that you're protected and you're good.
Sometimes that's reminding me of a story. One time I sold a house in Madison, kind of on the Isthmus, which is kind of close to downtown. Old classic Victorian, beautiful home over kind of in the Marquette neighborhood. And the owner had been there like 40 some years. I mean, she'd just been there a long time and was kind of borderline hoarder. Okay. She just had a ton of stuff in this big Victorian home. And we go to do our final walkthrough, and there is still a ton of stuff in the house. There's a ton of stuff also out on the curb. Okay. So you wonder if, like, is the city going to pick all this up? Who's picking this up? There's like a ton of stuff out there. And so, I mean, it would have been real easy to like get super fired up and blow everything up. But I just started being curious, like you said, right? Started documenting, taking pictures. Okay, well, this is what we're dealing with. Okay, well, we're going to have to make some phone calls, have some hard conversations. And we ended up getting through it, but, held some money back aside in case we had to hire the junk removal people to get stuff out removed and things like that. But, to your point, there is a solution, and we just need to, I think, be the calm, be in the storm, and just be there and come up with alternatives, right? What are the options? What are the alternatives that could be there that can actually make this somewhat satisfying, because ultimately, it can create anxiety, right? Like the buyers are coming in, they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do with all this stuff? What if she leaves a whole bunch of this stuff over that we don't want all this stuff here? What are we going to do about it? And like, they're anxious about it. And, it's our job to step in and kind of be that facilitator to make sure that's taken care of and make sure that's
I've cut, buyers, I cut the new lawn for them. The sellers just were out of state. This listing agent wasn't willing to do anything. So, I don't want the buyer moving to a new house and, they have to worry about cutting the grass on the first day.
Foot high grass.
Yeah. The city's on them. The city's already, they're all getting off on the wrong foot with the municipality or whatever. So, I've gone and cut grass. I've taken our dump trailer over and cleaned up, stuff that the sellers left in the yard. And, it ends up, it sucks. It's 2 hours, 3 hours of my time, but the job's done, and they're really satisfied. And they understand, like, I went the extra mile to get that done. And this business isn't about, clients. It's about fans, you're creating friends, you're creating a network, but you want fans when you're done. Fans are going to refer you a lot more than just somebody you do the minimal and get through it. So if you go a little extra mile, and it doesn't mean a lot, closing gifts are one thing, and those are great, but it's what did you do? How did you make them feel during that process? That is going to be the difference between you get a referral from them or not get a referral from them. It's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is that simple. It's being attuned to what's happening in the transaction, listening to those opportunities to add value, and then being that resource for whatever they need. I mean, I think that's when you do create those fans and people, that's when you do get referrals and you do get repeat business, is when you do listen to those things, So yeah, no, that's important. So, all right. Well, we've kind of hit on a lot of different areas. I don't know. Did you have, maybe we want to shift gears on something? And
yeah, man, what else are you thinking? Like, obviously this is geared for, real estate agents, right? So, I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, I'm still relatively new. I'm only 6 years in this business, so some people have been around for a long time. You can kind of see sometimes where people, burn out. I think the one thing we've been talking about lately, especially for the really busy agents, is, boundaries with clients and how those get established. Do you have any recommendations for agents when it comes to, boundaries?
Oh, like setting, like with a buyer, for example, they want to see a house late at night, or texting you at 9 o'clock at night or during dinner. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's all in the setup, right? And how do you set it up with the client? And, to me, I think whether it's with a buyer or a seller, I think it's just in having really clear upfront expectations of like, hey, if you call me at 5:30, I'm probably having dinner with my family. So if you leave me a message, great, I'll get back to you when I can, but it's not going to be immediate. If there's something that's time sensitive, I can text you or I can get to it. But, at the end of the day, most issues can be solved during business hours, right? And brain surgery, this isn't, something emergent, but sometimes you have to be available too when the clients are. So, one of the things I know we do, maybe you're similar at your brokerage, but I mean, we have kind of a team-based business where, if I'm not available, definitely one of my other team members probably is. And so, I have a conflict on an appointment this evening with a client. And so I'm having somebody else doing that showing so the client doesn't miss out on that opportunity. So I think part of it is, part of the benefit of going with more of a team-based business rather than just a solo agent. Sometimes if you are just a solo agent, that can be sort of the plus and the minus, right? You're not maybe having to share as much of your commission that you might earn, but you also are more dependent, and it's harder to step away, right? It's harder to, step away from that opportunity, or, sometimes people end up, working more on vacation when they don't want to or don't need to. But if you can have, some kind of hired help, even if it's an administrative help person, I think that's definitely going to help you as a business owner, and it's helped me grow for sure. I remember even early on in my business when, I'd started to achieve some success, I don't know, hitting 20, 30 transactions or something like that. And I was busy, but like, I wasn't confident that I could support like a full-time salary of an administrative help. Right. But instead, what I did is I hired somebody to just help with some of the paperwork and help organize some of the things. And it was a per transaction file. So I think, if you're getting to that level where you can't manage all the administrative stuff, like absolutely that needs to be your hire right away. And I think then because then you can be more focused and strategic with setting boundaries and setting up a good process with your clients. And I think that, as an agent, we need to know the process of buying or selling a home inside and out. Like we're in control of that process. We're the quarterback. Right. So, setting up good expectations and good boundaries is all about knowing the process and telling them what happens next, what's going to happen, how is it going to happen? And then they're not surprised. Right. So everything that we do kind of helps support those conversations, both with emails and videos and text messages or whatever it might be, to kind of help ease their frustration, their concerns, and all those kinds of things. So, but I think it all happens on that first appointment. Ideally with, if you're having a buyer, you're meeting them either in your office or doing a Zoom video meeting or something like that to kind of set those expectations and what's going to happen and how you can help address some of their fears, their questions, their concerns. Because if you don't have that conversation up front, then ultimately you can find yourself just being run ragged, right? Like they don't always know what to expect, or they just, push you. If you answer your phone one time at 6:30, then they just assume, oh, well, he's available at 6:30, right? Or 8:30 or whatever time you answer the phone, right? So sometimes it's just being clear about what's a reasonable expectation and what's not. But I think, when you're new, it's harder to say no, maybe. But I think as you gain experience and as you gain clients, then I think it's better, you gain more confidence and you're able to kind of put reasonable boundaries. Obviously, nobody wants to miss out on an opportunity, but if something doesn't happen immediately this evening, is it okay to get back to them in the morning? Like, hey, I saw your email or something. I'll look into it and get back to you tomorrow morning. Like,
yeah, I think just acknowledging them, at that point is getting that. I think the one thing that's funny is, and you bring that up, and I just read this book called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Awesome book. If you've ever read that, yep, you got it there too. Yeah, it's almost a staple. Yep, it's a great book. So, obviously you can't implement all of those things into real estate, but just understanding your time worth is pretty huge. So, but I think the one thing is, if you can just acknowledge somebody and be like, hey, I can't get to you tonight. I'm with the kids. My kids got games. I'm at dinner with my family. Nobody really argues that. They're just like, okay, cool. And they go from there. So, yeah, I think that's massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people expect that, right? Like if you have a family and if you have kids, like they want you to have your quality family time. They don't want to interrupt that. I mean, they want, obviously they want to buy or sell a home, or they want their answers or help getting into something when they need it. But, they also want you to have your own family time as well. So
for sure. Yeah. It's an interesting conundrum too. And when you get to be a broker, it's even more, because I think when you just start out as a broker, you have, for us, we went from, 3 agents to start, and then now we're at 14. And now everybody's, for me personally, like my team is still young. They're all rookies, within their first 2 years. And so one's pulling me one way, one's pulling me the other way. It's a lot. So I got to figure that out. And how can I still, take care of my clients, because you still have to be an agent for a while, to pay the bills. And then, how can I build my agents up to be the best, and then also not have them, call me at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, which I want them to if there's a situation. But, if it's a simple question that they can find on their own, and, we built a whole training program and manual that they can go into and look at. And it's like, hey, boundaries, guys, like, go look it up in Trainual first before you come and talk with me.
Yeah, no, that's having that's a good point to make too, is just, you have a training manual, you have a training process. And I think encouraging new agents, like, hey, there's resources available.
Be resourceful.
Be resourceful.
Being curious.
I mean, also building that resource library as a leader, as if you have aspirations to grow and become a team leader, become a broker owner, like, you need to make sure that you're building your library, your resource library for other people to be successful in your world.
Every transaction, there should be a case study, done, like, all right, this is what I learned on this one. This is what I don't want to do next time. And then keep the documents, like you have to anyway, but keep them somewhere so you can look back, after the first offer to purchase. There's only a couple of things that might be a little bit different in that offer to purchase that, the next one won't apply. Don't call your broker for every single time. Yeah. The goal should always be to become self-sufficient, so you don't have to rely on your broker to do everything. So, that's the whole reason the broker is there. And again, then the broker can help in other areas and find with other resources, and they'll be more confident in sending you, new people to talk to, and, passing off relationships from one to another. Notice I didn't call them leads. I hate that word. So, um,
Leads, yeah. Leads, you call it relationships, right?
Relationships, people,
Okay.
humans,
They're just people.
they all are,
Yep.
So but if people look at them as a lead, they're looking at them as a dollar sign. They're not looking at it as an opportunity to build a relationship. And that's a huge thing too.
Okay. That's an interesting, I mean, I never thought of it that way. I mean, there's a lot of the, even terminology in our CRM, right? It's like, it's a new thing, right?
Is it a hot lead? Is it a cold lead? Is it whatever, and it's like, cool, I get it. It's, technical, but if you can just start mentally treating humans like humans and not treating them as dollar signs, again, there, that it just helps because you're humanizing the process. Then empathy comes into play. Then compassion comes into play. You understand the journey they're going through a little bit more than worrying about, you showing up at the title company to collect your check. And that's always been something that's been a huge thing for me. And the other thing that just boggles my mind is agents who don't show up to closing. Like, I don't understand that at all. Like, you are with that person 6 months, sometimes a year, sometimes, even if it's 30 days, and you guys have this mutual relationship, you already know so much about them and their family.
Yeah.
And then on the biggest day, when they're making the biggest transaction of their life, you just don't bother to show up.
Yeah.
Like that drives me. That's so big for me. And it's been, and closing days are important. Now, investors, I don't show up to closings all the time, it's just an investment property for them and it's business for them. But somebody who's moving into a new home, that is important. That's the last time you probably see them for a while, other than, the standard check-ins and the other stuff. You get to hug them and to thank them for, trusting you throughout the process instead of, and then they obviously thank you so much. Yeah, we had a great one the other day where I was on both sides of it, and there was a lot of moving parts, and both people were just so appreciative. And I was at both closings. It's a big day. And there's tears a lot of times. And I think that was it too. My first closing was a guy who works for a logging company.
Yep.
He had lost his wife to. This is the one that took me 80 hours to get, but he had lost his wife to cancer earlier. We found him a lot on a river, and that was their dream, was to be able to buy a lot and move to, a place and build a house on the river. Yeah. And it was, I think 65,000, something like that. It wasn't much. And I still showed up to closing. The guy, almost made me cry. Like, my eyes were watering up, and he was telling the story about that. The closing officer, she was bawling, and it was like, it just it showed me how much it meant to be there. And he needed a hug, and I was there to give it to him, so that means more to people than anything. And, 7 years, 6 years later, or whatever it is now, when that closing happened, we're still, in contact occasionally and wishing them happy birthdays. And, hey, man, I still appreciate what you did. I actually sold that lot because I had, got a new woman in my life, and that would have been weird and whatever. And, so that kind of stuff is huge.
Sure. Yeah. No, it doesn't happen like that all the time, right? But
certainly doesn't.
Right. Doesn't. Sometimes that can be more challenging, right? And, maybe not everybody's celebrating as much, right? If you have a really tough transaction. But I mean, I remember one where we had sold a house on Lake Monona, and these people had built this house, and it was just this, they poured their heart and soul into it. And, they were leaving the state, they were going to Hawaii, for their dream to be in Hawaii. But then these people coming into Madison were like, they had a dream to live on the lake somewhere. And they were so excited. And we had a giant hug and took photos of everybody together. And everybody was excited about it.
Such a special day. It's such, and if we just treat it as a transactional, thing for us, then we're going to lose our way, I think. And that's where I think real estate agents get a bad name is, that's the expectation. We can go in and be work-like and professional and all those things, but we're humans, they're humans. And I think it's really important that day is shared, by all parties involved. And, lenders get involved, and the title companies get involved, and, that sort of thing. Like, tomorrow I'm going to a closing. I've never met the guy in person. He was a referral. One of my associates, I was busy, so he went and showed them the property. But I've been on the phone and talking with this guy for a year. And, the first house he looked at the second house he looked at was the one he ended up getting. And I still haven't met him. So I'm going to closing tomorrow to, thank him for working with me throughout the process. But I don't even know what the guy looks like, quite honestly. Yeah. So I'm excited to meet him and his wife. And, it was a referral from a close friend and another client that had passed it on. So we've never met, but I'm going to go closing day and say hi.
There you go. Well, that seems like the right thing to do. So, Yeah. Well, I think we hit on some good topics, and I think at the end of the day, right? Show up, be there, show up to closing, be authentic, be vulnerable, be empathetic. I think those are a lot of the themes I'm hearing throughout this conversation, and I think I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think those are things that I've found to also be attributed to a lot of my success that I've had in the business over the years. So I can totally resonate with all that stuff. So yeah.
Listen, be there, show up, problem solve, game over. You got it.
Game over. You got this for sure. So yeah, right on. Well, I know we've been chatting for quite a while. I don't know. Any other last parting words or words of wisdom?
No, man, just thanks for having me on. I appreciate, you reaching out and, having me on here, and hopefully the listeners of this get a little value out of it. And, I wish every agent that listens to this, the best of luck. And if you're up in Green Bay or looking for a little change of scenery, we do things a little bit different here. So
there you go. I'll have to stop by on my way to the next Packer game or something.
There you go. Yeah, the draft is going to be crazy, man. The draft is next week. So it's been wild up here. The whole stage, and Green Bay is it's a different place right now. So there's a lot of buzz.
It is just kind of buzzing with excitement up there. Yep. That's cool.
Yeah, Green Bay is 100,000, right? And then maybe the surrounding area is another 150 to 200. So we have 300,000 people here. There's going to be 300,000 people here just for the draft. So,
oh my God.
We're doubling our population in a week.
Holy cow. Unreal.
Yeah,
wow. That'll be interesting. Crazy. That's cool, man. Well, Monte, I appreciate you again coming on the show. And hopefully if you're listening and watching this, hopefully you got some value out of our conversation. And I'm just excited that I was able to have this conversation with Monte today, and hopefully add value to our listeners as well. So
if you're up in Green Bay or Northeast Wisconsin and just want to chat, feel free to reach out to me at 920-680-8532, or you can find me at tarealtygroup.com. That's our website. And then I'm on all the social medias as well, except for Pinterest, I think. That's probably it.
I think I created a Pinterest board a while ago, and I don't think I've done anything in a few years. I don't know.
I got nothing. I don't even understand it.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, well, and so there you go. If you want to chat more with Monte, feel free to reach out. And obviously I'm in Madison, and you can find us online and reach out to us as well, 608-440-9886. But again, you're listening to the Better Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Lavik, and here with Monte Reyment from Take Action Realty in Green Bay. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Josh.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Better Agent Podcast. I hope you found today's insights valuable. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for more tips, Q&A sessions, and sneak peeks into our 21-day challenge. To get full access of our show notes and more details on the 21-day challenge, go to abetterrealestateexperience.com. Keep striving for greatness, and I'll see you on the next episode.